All right, everybody, we're going to talk about the topic of lightweight hunting, or just in general, considering the weight of your pack and your entire kit when you head out in the field, pretty much anywhere. And to do so, we've brought in, actually, we got a pretty big crew here for the podcast this time. So we got Jimmy and Mark, and then going around the table, we've got Erik here scribbling something down in his notebook. Mm-hmm. We've got Ryan Muckenhirn. He's been on the podcast a fair amount of times. We have Paul Neess, who also has been on the podcast, and he told a crazy awesome story last time. Maybe we'll hear some more awesome stories. That was in the Blood Trail podcast, so check it out. And then, international man of mystery, Dave Hamilton. So we've mentioned him a couple of times, actually. We've talked behind his back on the podcast a time or two about how lightweight savvy he is. And so we had to bring him on. We had to bring him on to talk about some of this stuff. He's got his laptop up, which I know on there is some pretty crazy Excel spreadsheets.
It's pretty heavy to bring to the podcast.
Yeah, actually,
I almost didn't bring
got
it.
You're ounces to a science.
You're rolling surprisingly heavy to this podcast. So anyway, talking about lightweight hunting. Now, there's kind of a buzz phrase, if you will, these days. Paul, you've been hunting for quite some time. You're a guide. For how long again? It was
a long time, about 18 years.
Yeah,
and a lot of high altitude stuff, a lot of sheep hunting, high country mule deer, goats. So yeah, I've counted ounces in my time.
You have. Okay, so even I guess back when you were guiding and guiding for quite some time, lightweight hunting. So is it like nowadays, is it coming on scene, or has it always been a thing, or is it just that the technology has advanced so much lately, or what do you think in your experience?
I'd say it's come on more in the last few years. It's always been there, though. Anybody, you can go back and read stories of sheep hunting, 40 years ago, 50 years ago. Everybody was, even then, you were conscious of the weight, the stuff you hauled around. Technology has certainly changed, though, and Dave will get into some of that stuff as we get going, but the options that you've got now for gear, from food to tents to, whether it's a bow gun, it's just changed astronomically from what it used to be, and so the choices and the stuff that's available to people now is worlds better from what it was then. Back when I did a lot of that, the go-to shelter to stay in was a bivy sack, which people still use today too. But now there's a lot of, options that are probably just as light as the bivy sacks we used to stay in, and you've actually got a little room to put your gear and tent and stuff in. So, there's just all kinds of cool stuff out there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, that brings up. So we've talked about before here on the podcast, and we got into backcountry hunting a little bit when Erik was going out to South Dakota and then later Montana. People inevitably always pack probably or have a tendency to pack more than what they actually need. So some of lightweight hunting or considering your weight is sometimes just not packing as much stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And so I'd be curious to hear some of your guys' thoughts on that. But then also, once it comes down to what you do pack, there's some pretty crazy stuff. I think this is some of the stuff that I was so baffled at when Dave was talking about that you do take into consideration. We'll get there, but things like understanding calories per ounce of food that you take. Like what is the most nutrition packed food? Things like Mark has his classic example of stoves. I'll let you bring that one up. I don't want to take your thunder, but why don't you guys start tossing out some things like, first off, just not taking as much stuff. We talked about it a little bit in backcountry hunting, but do you need 18 pairs of socks? Do you need your favorite college hoodie to lounge around in around the tent? Do you need 20 pairs of underwear? I don't know. Go for it.
Who wants to start?
Boy, there's so much stuff to go over.
I want to go over socks real quick because that was a good one.
Yeah,
there we go.
Right.
And underwear. We
Socks.
got to start
Socks
and underwear.
We got to start somewhere.
My hunting partner will inevitably listen to this podcast, and we returned from Wyoming a couple weeks ago from a antelope and mule deer hunt, and we took my truck, and I brought a small tote, my pack, my gun case, and that was it. Oh, and my cooler. And the rest of the vehicle, all of this fit into my into the cab of my pickup, and the rest of the vehicle to the roof was full of his stuff. So, Kenny, if you're listening to this, you only need to bring 2 pairs of socks. My first trip in 07, I've mentioned this in the podcast before. I think I brought 14 pairs of socks, planning on stepping in puddles and lakes every day, at least twice, and then having a pair of socks to change into it. And it's not required. Don't overpack your socks. Get a good pair of performance wool socks, and get 2, and then just bring that. That's fine. Rotate them out.
Yeah,
You'll be okay.
and a lot of that stuff, guy can wash a pair of socks every other day. Not that hard to wring them out. Usually hang them in the sun when you're hunting during the day or in the breeze.
And it feels good. You take your socks off after a long boot in. Oh, man. Let that air flow around your toes.
Oh, yeah. That's,
Well, a lot of that comes into just knowing, when you're in the wilderness, learning different tips you can do for things. Like, so for example, if you're in a snowstorm, and you can't really hang up a wet pair of socks, you can actually lay them. I know this sounds horrible. You can lay them out on your chest underneath your sleeping bag, and your body heat will just dry them out overnight. So there's different things you can do like that to, keep it to a minimal amount and not have to have, a set of socks for every day you're out there.
Totally. I just went on a hunt where we weren't backcountry camping. We were actually staying in a very lovely place, and I brought an extra pair of socks for every day. And I think I did only wear 2 of them.
Yeah.
Is it kind of an inevitable thing to get your socks wet, or is most of the time you guys are talking about getting your socks wet? Is that just when you wash them? And why would you?
It depends on the hunt.
Yeah.
I would say it greatly varies on the hunt.
Yeah, and and if you're hiking a lot, even if you never tread anything, you're going to get some foot sweat in there. They're going to get damp and wet.
Yeah.
So you might as well figure on that.
Yep.
I got me some wet socks for the first time, like wet, like from outside moisture. This past September when I was bow hunting in South Dakota, so I changed my socks. That was it.
There you have it.
I mean, foot sweat, yeah, but not like wet. So my boots got wet.
Okay.
Is there a specific material you guys are looking at when you're choosing a sock? I've heard Paul, you mentioned wool. Are you referring to merino or?
Yeah, well, I don't know. Yeah, you could run merino. I mean, I'm not wildly picky about what type of wool is in my socks. I'm generally kind of looking for a good fit in the boot. So sometimes that might be a sock that's a little bit thicker, a little bit thinner. But I do strive to get that kind of ideal, no slop, no movement, but not quite tight enough that it's pinching off circulation or someplace in there.
Dave,
I've tried various things like alpaca wool is supposed to be
that's what I was going to ask
roughly
about.
3 times warmer than merino wool, but what I found is that the most important thing, I mean, Paul hit it, is the fit of the sock. And it sounds kind of weird to say that, but it's something I recently learned actually just through trial and error. And the alpaca wool socks, yeah, they're warmer, but the ones that I found just didn't fit very well. They didn't have a good shape. They didn't hold to your foot, and so you're going to get blisters with that. And
kind of slippy, slidey, like when your foot was in them. That's never good.
So I went back to a merino wool sock that makes a really good fitting sock. And actually, the sock that I'm using doesn't have a whole lot of stretch to it either, and so it stays put a little bit better. So
I like to wear my basketball socks, so that way if any deer are looking to get dunked on, I can just show them up
in their face.
Yeah.
Back to that talk on the fit too. A lot of times, especially if it's a hunt where you're climbing a lot and it's pretty hardcore stuff, I will wear the really thin little silk liners.
Yeah, that was my next
underneath
question.
that wool sock, and so there again, it's kind of stacking that fit. You don't want them to be pinched and your foot crushed in there, but the silk liner will help your foot just move in there a little bit easier, a little less likely to get blisters and damage to your feet.
So, that was my next question. Glad you touched on that.
Now, because I've worn those before, and they kind of weird me out because I feel like my foot is actually slipping more than it normally might. But
you're probably a little loose on the overall fit, then would be my guess. Usually by the time I've got a silk liner and a wool sock and I'm in my boot, I don't really notice that silk liner anymore. It just feels very comfortable. It's
Mark
not
likes
too tight.
to get his boots big. He did
a little bit
big.
Not
we fought
too
about
big.
this for a long time
because you say
kept
that
telling me
you're like, I want my toes jammed in there, and I'm like, I don't think that's a great idea.
I over exaggerate a little bit. I just don't like slop in my shoes, and that comes from like sports. Like I
You
like
know
my-
that I mean the boot thing actually makes me think of something else that I was thinking about, and I see this all the time hunting, even people who want to go really lightweight. And in my opinion, from what I've seen out there, and my background too, like before I was a hunter, I was much more into rock climbing and mountaineering, and so those communities, they were doing a lot of forging in the ultra lightweight market. Before even some of the hunting market was.
Yeah.
And some of the technology and equipment they had, I think, was advancing faster. And now the hunting market's starting to catch up to that. But from what coming from that background, I tend to go with, lighter weight footwear that doesn't have as tall of ankle support. Now, some people need that ankle support. But what I see a lot of times out there hunting is people using these giant boots. They're just way overkill for the situation. And, I just did an extremely hard hunt, and I had, just a mid-top, pretty lightweight boot. And a lot of guys will think, well, this is a really crazy hunt. I need to have these giant boots.
Like a
on my
mid
feet.
calf full lace.
Yeah, there's no flex to the sole whatsoever. And I mean, for me, unless I'm going to be like, the vast majority of the time on deep snow, I want flex in my footwear. I think a lot of guys think they need to have these giant, super stiff boots. But I think more flex is good unless you're really going to be kick stepping for a good part of your hunt in snow.
Now, how much of that, kind of knowing a little bit about your workout and prep regimen, how much of that is training, do you think?
I think that part of it is.
Yeah.
I think
So-
guys
Well,
that
it's,
get used
it's
to
ankle strength is
Yep.
part of it.
Yeah, and then arch strength
Yep.
and everything like
Absolutely.
that. Because I know if I were to take, well, actually, I did. I switched from my full grain or my full leather boot to my synthetic boot on that hunt in South Dakota because I got them wet and they weren't drying quick because we had a lot of moisture and we weren't making fires or anything like that. So I switched to my synthetic boot, which has much less sole rigidity to it. And in 2 days, I could definitely feel a strain that wasn't there before.
Yeah.
And this is, of course, conditioning. I think you can work that out. So,
Yep,
I mean,
for sure.
That's a thing. That's a thing that the running market has gotten into. You see a lot of these like barefoot style running shoes and
Yeah.
stuff. I remember like being in track in high school and college, switching over to that at one point, and it's like your first 2 weeks of track practices, like in those barefoot style shoes, you want to die.
yeah.
Yeah.
But after a while, you gain tremendous amounts of foot strength. Actually, I mean, this is just an aside, but after I've used those types of shoes ever since, and I used to have really big problems with my ankles, with ankle rolls and stuff like that, I have put my ankles through absolute hell and high water now since doing this. It's like I've never had a rolled ankle ever again.
So
since then.
a good note to anyone listening, I guess. Don't go out and buy the lightest weight minimalist hunting boot you can.
Yeah,
because
don't dive in.
Train in those
Yeah.
and then
Yep.
yeah.
You got to step down. Like
Yeah.
they have levels of like, this one is literally basically like your barefoot, but with like a rubber thing on the bottom of your foot. There's stepping down is usually a good idea.
Yeah.
Well, then you're just talking about the weight of those boots, though. I mean, the hunt will dictate that too. I mean,
It
if
will.
you're going like
Terrain,
late
yeah.
season, cold weather hunt, you might need
Yep.
a little bit more boot.
Yep, for sure.
So what other areas, like, okay, we've talked about feet quite a bit here, your socks and your boots. What do they call, I mean, maybe we should call this something about your feet. What do they call those people who work with feet? It's
Podiatrist.
Podiatrist.
Oh, okay.
Podiatrist. Yeah.
Don't go there.
Anyway, but what are other areas like, okay, so here's one, for example. I think, a lot of it, I think, just comes down to not taking excess, right? Like we're going to go, actually, tomorrow, we're leaving, Mark, Ryan, and I, we're leaving for Nebraska, and we've talked about, probably only wearing like one outfit, so to speak, I don't know what else to call it, the whole time. Because, I mean, you'll probably be fine. Like, I'm taking 2 backup pairs of socks just because that's me.
Way too much
I'm taking
weight.
like one.
Way too much weight.
I'm taking one like people shirt, like, just like a shirt, and then like.
And that's not even while you're hunting, though. That's just to and from.
Yeah, to and from. And then, but otherwise, it's just basically like the gear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like rain gear, the soft shell, the base layers, all that stuff. And it's like, if you've got that, as far as gear, that stuff goes, clothing.
We touched on this on the first iteration of the Backcountry Hunting podcast. And that was just outerwear and its weight. And when I had switched to technical hunting clothing versus like, well, I guess we'll call it store-bought hunting clothing or like big box store hunting clothing, I asked myself, how did I ever do it? Because my entire clothing system not counting like rain gear, went from like a 8-pound parka and 6-pound pants to like 8 pounds of total outerwear.
And Ryan, what piece would you say gave you the warmth that you needed without the weight?
It was the puffy.
Oh.
Yeah.
Mark's puffy.
Oh,
The
that's music to his ears.
The infamous Mark Puffy.
The first year I worked here, he's like, "You got to get a puffy coat." And I'm like, "God, who is this guy?" Probably
This
doesn't
guy
even
sips lattes at coffee stores with his puffy coat.
soy
Sometimes.
lattes.
So,
I mean, I'll tell you, and I wrote down like some big picture tips here, but like one of the things I would say, as nerdy as it sounds, if you're going to do a serious backcountry hunt, is make a spreadsheet. I know it sounds super nerdy, but on me being more of an engineer, I mean, I think that way, but you can't, if you can't see what you're carrying, you can't attack the heaviest areas of your kit right away. And so, that's what I'll do is I'll lay out a spreadsheet and I'll actually weigh everything that goes in my pack. And as ridiculous as that sounds, I will weigh every item and I'll put it on that spreadsheet, and I will break that spreadsheet down to show like what's gear weight, what's food weight, what's anticipated, 3 liters of water at any given period of time weight. And the various components of that weight, I'll break it all down so I can really, and then what I do is I look at what's the heaviest thing in my whole kit right now, and I ask myself, is there any way I can make that lighter?
Yeah.
And I start there, and then I make that lighter till it's no longer the heaviest thing anymore, and then I look at the next heaviest thing, and that's what I do.
This is perfect. Look at Dave dovetailing perfectly, podcast style, into what we want to talk about, which is kind of like your spreadsheet, and now really getting into that lightweight stuff. Taking things that you are bringing and trying to pare down that way, or that you're bringing. So already ensuring you're not bringing excess, but maybe you can make the stuff that you need to bring lighter weight. Now, I think some of this stuff that Dave's talking about goes back to his mysterious past. I think he's been he's had to be ingrained with that ultra planning mindset. But Dave, here's one question too that I want to throw out there, actually for everybody, not just for Dave, but one thing that I've seen a lot, probably being on social a fair amount, is that when you see people talking about lightweight hunting, or, look at this new knife, it's all skeletonized in the handle, or it looks like a tiny little piece, unfolded paper clip with a blade on the end, or whatever. People start saying, oh, why don't you just do more push-ups? Or, why don't you just run more? And it's like, I see everybody here is like fairly fit. So what are we all worried about? Like, we're fairly fit. I mean, why don't we just do more push-ups? We'll just carry it up. We just take more weight, carry it up the mountain,
I could
honestly,
a few more push-ups.
I would say that if I'm hearing that from someone, I would put a good guess down that they haven't actually done a really serious hard hunt.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And there are there are a couple of people out there in the world that are just total supermen. I mean, in the climbing world, I mean, you think of some of the famous guys like Jim Bridwell and Yvon Chouinard and John Long. I mean, they're supermen, right? But I mean, 99.99% of us are not, those guys, the Conrad Anchors of the world. And I mean, people on the podcast probably don't know that, though. These are mountaineers and rock climbers that are famous, from my background. And so, and even those guys are going as light as they can possibly go whenever they're doing their crazy adventures. And when you actually get out there and you realize what you're doing, every ounce you can cut off gives you an advantage to get to where you want to hunt quicker, to feel better, when you are spending time glassing, and to just not beat yourself up.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of it comes down to how much you're exerting and how many calories you're using and things like that. Because I mean, it doesn't matter, realistically speaking, if you're more in shape or not.
Yeah.
Let's say you take a 170-pound guy who's really in shape, and the 170-pound guy who just happens to be 170 pounds because his metabolism's high, but otherwise he eats potato chips and plays video games all day. Mark, why are you raising your hand?
I don't play video games. It was a pretty accurate description.
When the potato chips came out.
But it's like, oh wait, actually, I was kind of going off my point. But anyways, you raise your hand anyway. But like, you take the guy who's really in shape. If you put more weight on, he can't go as far. If you put less weight on, he can go further. And
why not get every advantage you can?
The more in shape you get, the further you can go.
Yeah.
Anyway,
I mean, I train way, way heavier than what I go in with. But I still, I mean, if I could have my pack be 0 pounds, I would go in with it 0 pounds.
Mm-hmm.
I want every advantage I can get.
Overtraining.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's key. Not overtraining as in like too much training, but like we call that overtraining.
Yeah.
You track 400-meter runners. You always ran 450 workouts. So then that way, when you ran 400, it was easier.
Yeah,
I mean, it's almost that
I
same-
think when you were talking to me, it's like the bet. If you can shave off excess body weight, that's only going to be a plus for you. You should definitely try to get that down as low as you can. But then, having a lighter pack, less food, less gear. You can go a little further. You can climb a little easier. It pays dividends all the way around. And like Dave said, after you've done one or two of these, you realize how nice it is to have less weight.
Yeah.
It's just a big advantage.
Yeah.
It's more energy for you. I look at when you go in a hunt like that, you kind of have, I always sort of see it as a finite bank of energy that you're going to work with. And if you're carrying less weight, you're going to save some more of that energy to go a little further, hunt an extra day or two or whatever it is. But it's like it pays dividends. It's absolutely worth doing.
Yeah, and a lot of that weight comes in food. I mean, food is one of the most heavy things that you carry on a week long or 2 week long trip. And it's kind of funny because you get in this cycle where you're like, well, if I take more food, I'm going to be heavier, which means I'm going to be burning more calories. And you got to find like this
But
happy
you can
medium.
eat more calories.
And I find on a lot of my trips, like I end up taking an amount of food. I'm burning more calories than the food that I'm carrying a lot of times. I'll come back lighter because it's like I could carry more food, but then I was just burning more calories and beating myself up more. And you got to find that happy medium where, maybe it's just enough or slightly less than what you're actually burning.
You spilled the beans on the last podcast you were on that we're brothers, so I'm fine saying this. But we had a discussion at a family birthday party a while back where you were talking about taking a small droplet bottle of olive oil because you had found out that the calories per ounce of olive oil was higher than. I mean, like, what's going on? Like, what did you actually? So you went on this big hunt. I don't know if you want to say it. Feel free. I'll let you do that. But you went on this big hunt. It was pretty extreme, relatively speaking, I would say. And you were really paring down the weight for it. What did you do for food again? Like, I don't even remember what the ultimate thing was. I remember throwing out sardines. I suggested that because those things they come in a little tin, a lot of nutrition.
I actually ended up not taking the olive oil with me, but the olive oil it's 250 calories per ounce, and so I think it's got the most calories per ounce of any food that I was able to find. Your body, from what I've read, can handle about 2 ounces a day. So I was thinking about pouring an ounce on my breakfast and an ounce on my dinner. So it'd be a very light way to get extra calories. I ended up not taking it for various reasons, but I mean, honestly, like for dinners, I went to the good old Mountain House. Now I repackaged them. So, and this is where, getting into lightweight here, and I'll just give you like an idea of where the spreadsheet comes from. We'll tie it back to the spreadsheet. So you're like, well, why did you repackage it? Well, I vacuum sealed it. Okay. So I took the food out of the package, and then there's the little like fresh, packet in there, whatever. I threw that out.
Does not taste that good anyway.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, no, it doesn't
Yeah.
taste good. And
They
then
might as well be.
FYI, that is not salt.
yeah.
They might as well be stuffing their package full of lead with that pack in there. It's so heavy. Anyway.
So then I vacuum sealed it, and I vacuum sealed it with as little of extra vacuum sealed plastic package around it as I possibly could. And then what I did is I did a test. I weighed a package in its Mountain House package before, and I weighed it after. And it was something like, if I remember right, maybe 0.9 ounces lighter. And you might be like, are you kidding me? 0.9 ounces lighter? But if you go on a 10-day hunt, and you're having Mountain House for breakfast and Mountain House for dinner, and you're cutting an ounce off of every one of those, well, now that's just, what is that, 20 ounces you just cut out of your pack? And that's like close to 1.5 pounds right there,
Bingo.
So a pound and a quarter, I think it is. And that's a lot on one item. I just cut 1.25 pounds out of my pack.
That is an awesome example of really showing how things add up.
Yeah.
Yeah. It really is. So you ended up going with the Mountain House, no sardines.
No, and then for like my meals during the day, I might actually do something different in the future. I heard from our good friend Steve Ranella about the green belly bars. I'm going to give that a try. I'm going to actually test it out before my next hunt just to see if I want to go that way. But they've got a lot of calories, and they're supposedly pretty good to eat. I got a couple at home. I got to try.
Oh, did you get them
out.
already?
I did get some at home to try out. Yeah. But this time I took a lot of pistachios and almonds. They're around the 160 calories per ounce.
That's one of my favorites. Is nuts. Yeah.
And then actually, peanut M&Ms are about 135 calories per ounce. Same with Snickers bars. I actually find Snickers have more calories per ounce than a lot of the Cliff bars do.
Yeah.
You also found that Snickers improperly weighed their bars, didn't you? You actually weighed.
Oh, yeah, I
the
actually
individual
weighed
Snickers
them.
bars.
Yeah.
You've got a big bone to pick with Snickers right now.
I do.
It says it on
I
the
do.
pack, mind you, but he had to actually weigh them.
Yeah, I wrote a review. I was very mad.
Did you
This-
repackage the Snickers bars too?
No,
then?
I actually didn't.
He
'cause
wrapped them in a soy
they're
paper
pretty
so the
light.
package is edible.
This is a good discussion because when you look, and Dave can run through the numbers quickly, when you look at an overall pack for a hunt, food is a huge chunk
Yep,
of it. You know,
it
what
is.
did you figure? Maybe a third of your weight is.
I mean, I was
close to that, maybe?
like 20 pounds roughly. Maybe it was like 18 pounds for about 11 and a half days.
Yeah,
So,
it's a bit, and it's a big chunk of space in your pack,
it is. Huge.
volume wise. Yeah.
Yeah.
So all this stuff is really good, and hitting that calories per ounce. That's like there's like that golden number of
200.
200 is really good.
Yep.
Nothing less than
Yeah.
100. You mentioned, Dave, when you came out of that hunt, and what we're talking about here for everybody is Dave did a hunt in the unlimited sheep zones in Montana, which is we can save that for a different day, but it's a really, really tough, hard hunt. You came out. Tell us a little bit about what you sort of planned going in, and then I think you mentioned you came out with some food. You brought some out. You
Yeah.
thought maybe you'd gone in a little heavy. What did you
Yep.
find that as you went through that hunt, diet wise, kind of worked and didn't work for you?
yeah, well, one of the reasons I came out with some food is we actually came out a little bit early. I was pretty sure the area we were in didn't have a sheep, and it would have taken us so many days to get to another area to hunt that our hunt would have been over by then. So it was a big learning lesson. It was the first time I had done that. So I think I would have had less food left over had we stayed
Had
the
it
full,
gone the full length of
time.
the-
But with that being said, and this is something that's always, and this goes into another tip, is I'll take these Right in the Rain pages and I'll rip like 2 or 3 of them out and then just a really tiny pencil to keep it as light as possible. And I'll write notes at night or in the morning, or if I'm glassing and it's a slow period, I'll write some notes on what works and what doesn't work so I can remember that for the next time. And, food is a big one, and trying to find something that you're actually willing to eat.
That you're gonna
And
eat.
you're gonna
That's
actually
a big part
eat.
of it.
And so, it's like some things are just harder to put down. I mean, I had these dried mandarin or dried mangoes with me, and those were awesome. And even the nuts, I ate a lot of them, but I found that I didn't quite eat all the almonds. The pistachios, on the other hand, were easier for me to eat. And everybody's going to be different. And then I just looked at what I had left over. I actually packaged everything, so I had like breakfast day one, lunch day one, and then I had each type of item like individually packaged with the weight put on the package. And so that way I could go back and look, I've only eaten about 3/4 of what on a daily basis now that it's 7 days have gone by, and I can go back and see there's about 1/4 left in every day that I've gone by. So I write that down, and I think, well, next time I go in, I felt like I had enough energy, I had enough food, even though I lost a little bit of weight, but they're about 1/4 of the lunch food I didn't eat, so I'm going to pack 1/4 less next time.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
And that's a hard thing to get over too, because it's food and you think like, man, I need that to sustain. But I've found when I get out there the same thing, my appetite changes. Like I'm excited to, eat this Mountain House or these other dehydrated meals, but they get old after
Yeah,
4 or 5,
I don't
6
think
days.
I could do Mountain House every day.
No, it gets tough. And so I find a lot of times like at night, if I get back, if it wasn't a crazy exertion day where I know that not eating could really put me into dire straits, a lot of times I'm just like, I'm not hungry. I'll have a Snickers or some sort of Pro Bar or a Cliff Bar or something, drink some water, and go to bed. And so my appetite changes a lot when I'm out there. And the tendency that I've always had is to overpack food because you want to make sure that you're
it's
fueled.
easy to do. Yeah.
But
I do like those Pro Bars.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Eric, do you like to take a lot of Reese's cups?
Oh man, I was thinking about
That's
that.
your weakness. I was wondering what the calories per ounce on those.
Yeah,
things
when
are.
you mentioned Snickers, that right away piqued my interest in figuring out what a Reese's peanut butter cup has to offer.
Yeah.
we have a
Got peanut butter
locked
and chocolate.
Yeah,
we have
exactly.
a locked drawer at Vortex with Reese's cups in it, and it is locked so that Eric
Can't get in.
can't
He's
get
just
in.
a hungry little
We actually
bear.
just we sometimes we do something good. We'll throw a Reese's cup in there.
Well, and like even, I think it also tied with this ultralight is also speed. And so it makes me think of other things like, I'll take the Mountain House and there's some that are very easy to eat and also some that are less messy. And so you guys know, like when you're on a hunt, I mean, you're hitting it hard all day long, hunting and glassing. And then when the sun goes down, it's like you want to get as much sleep as you can. And so, just to have to take less stuff. What's the easiest thing to clean up in your pot or whatever you have? And then 2, just time-wise, I would write down, well, this meal was very easy to clean up. It was very tasty. It was very easy to clean up. And then maybe there's another one that was real messy and I didn't like it as much. So I'll write that one off and I won't take that one again because, when I'm done eating, I want to be able to clean that cup out as fast as I can, pack it away and get in my sleeping bag.
How much did your pencil weigh?
Oh, like 0.3 ounces probably. I probably have it on my spreadsheet here somewhere.
I was going to ask Dave, when you repackaged, your dehydrated meals, so were you pouring those into your pot and then cooking them in your pot, or were you cooking them in the vacuum seal bag?
So I was eating out of my cup, or my pot, whatever you want to call it. It was really just like a cup. I'm not a coffee guy, so I didn't have a separate coffee mug or anything. So I cooked the water right in the cup, and then I would time my fuel as well. So we were about 11,000 feet a lot of the time, and it would take close to 2 minutes to cook, get it just starting to be a rolling boil.
Did you calculate that ahead of time?
Yeah. Oh yeah, fuel weight and everything. Yep.
So you actually knew how much at a certain elevation and a certain temperature it would take to boil water.
Yeah, you can figure that all out. You can look that up and kind of estimate out how much fuel you need. And
either I was a doctor or he was I don't know.
But yeah, so I'd cook it and then I'd just pour it into the cup and then let it sit there for a little bit and then eat it right out of the cup and then just maybe clean the cup out and that was it.
What were you using to clean the cup?
I just my fingers and I dump a little bit of water in there and just kind of like scrub it around with my fingers and then like fling it. I like to like fling it real wide so you're not dumping like a big mess. Being a little bit of my granola mountaineering background, the leave no trace thing, plus bears and that kind of thing. You don't want to have them coming in, but
interesting.
Now, what I'm really excited for is Dave to make this breakthrough on dehydrating water so that it's lighter.
Yeah. Yep.
We're talking
powdered water.
We're talking about burn rates of stoves there, and one of my favorite conversations with Dave is we were talking about a couple different stove options, and one on the surface appeared to be the clear option if you're looking to save weight.
Oh, the lightest stove.
Yep, so it was physically the lightest stove, and I think Ryan and I were both pretty excited about it. And then Dave let us know that he researched the burn rates of these two stoves we were comparing, and the one actually had the one that was physically lighter weight had a higher burn rate, so you were actually going to carry more fuel in to sustain the stove. Yeah. And that's when I knew I don't really need to make my own spreadsheets or do my own research because I have a Dave.
Just cheat off. Just cheat off.
Exactly. If only everyone had a Dave around.
Yeah, it was so funny though because we were in that conversation. We were like super excited about it. Dave like nonchalantly walks by. What you guys talking about? Lightweight stoves. Which one? Told him. Oh yeah, just kind of balloon pop. And then just
Well, that's how it goes around here a lot. I mean, someone will come up and be like, "Hey, Dave, I just built this lightweight rifle," and be like, "How much does it weigh?" "Oh, it's like 6 pounds." "Oh gosh."
Sorry. Good luck with your herniated disc.
I'm sorry to hear that. How much is your rifle again? Can you explain your rifle?
Well, and there's lighter rifles out there than what I'm using too.
Okay.
I mean, there are lighter rifles.
Skeletonized barrels.
Yep, drilling holes in the lenses of my optic. So no, but I obviously want to be able to take a good shot too, and for me the precision, and actually it really goes along with Vortex is being all about precision. So I like a stock that has a little bit of, I call it like a thumb swale. That's more of a nice shape for like a target style stock. But yeah, I had one built, and I was using a stock that's actually Glenn Seekins makes it. Seekins Precision on his Havoc rifles, and if you Google that, you can look it up and see what the shape is. It's the weight of a lot of the lighter weight carbon fiber, more traditional mountain hunting style
but
stocks
it's not
out
carbon
there.
fiber?
It is carbon fiber.
Oh, okay.
But just the way he built it, it's lighter than a lot of the other stocks with that shape out there, and it's the weight of more of what you would see in like a traditional mountain hunting stock. So I was kind of trying to go a little bit. That was an area where I cheated on my weight a little bit because I know that I shoot better with that kind of stock. But I had a titanium action and bolt on there. Actually, no, the one I took this year, I think that rifle didn't quite get finished, so I ended up taking a heavier rifle this year. But I'm still in the works of finishing up this other rifle that has the titanium bolt on it and has it's actually going to end up with a carbon fiber barrel on it. I calculated out just based off of what I could see online, and the carbon fiber barrels were going to be a little bit heavier than what I wanted. And then I got one in and I weighed it, and it actually was a little bit lighter. And that actually is really a tip too. Like if you're getting equipment, I always on my spreadsheet, as nerdy as it sounds, I put it down in red before I've weighed it, and then after I weighed it, I switch it to black because you will see all the time where stuff is not actually what they list online.
Like those liars at Snickers.
Yeah, exactly.
Don't even get me started.
Exactly.
Jeez.
Yep.
What?
So it's about
what-
5 pounds. Is this one I'm building now? Unfortunately, the one I had to take this year was more like about 7 pounds rifle base weight.
Which is still
Yeah.
pretty light.
Might as well just carry a dumbbell out there.
I go.
Yeah, I know.
I go back and forth on the ultralight rifle thing. My obsession with mountain style rifles happened a long time ago. They're a lot harder to shoot. If you shoot a lot, then they're fine. If you get really accustomed to them, but they are a harder gun to shoot.
No question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for
Like you're more shaky with them because
I mean, dimensionally they're
they hit you
smaller.
harder?
Yep, dimensionally they're smaller. So to like Dave's build, if you were to look at the stock on that, it looks like what you would find on like a police or a military sniper rifle. It's just out of an extraordinarily lightweight and strong material. So the rifle lends itself, I think, a higher degree of shootability than a lot of the off-the-shelf
Right.
ultralights. Now, if you can get very comfortable shooting an ultralight rifle, that's one thing. But even for as much shooting as I do and as much as I fancy a lightweight rifle, I've got kind of a line in the sand in which I'll draw, like, I won't go over this caliber because it'll start to be very difficult to shoot.
Yep.
And what good is a rifle that weighs nothing that you can't shoot worth a darn? So,
Yep.
Well, and a lot of guys, I think, use calibers that are way bigger than they need. It's like, the precision, I think, is important. And you touched on something where I think is like, I go ultra lightweight, but at the end of the day, you're trying to close the deal on taking game, right? And so there's a few key things where you can't really compromise. You got to have a rifle that shoots well, and you got to have optics, in my opinion. And I know that sounds biased because we're Vortex, but I mean, if you can't find them, you can't shoot them.
Right.
That's
You
fair.
know?
Especially
so
when you're
those
on
are
a hunt.
areas where I won't really compromise a whole lot.
Yeah, especially when you're on a hunt like you were on, where finding one of those sheep is like.
Yep.
I mean, that's
Needle
hard.
and haystack. Yeah,
There's a reason they make it unlimited.
You need the
Yeah.
optics. Yeah.
Yeah.
if you can make your rifle 9 pounds or less, find weight somewhere else, you'll be okay. You don't need to strive for a 3-pound rifle. Well,
Yeah, you just got this like 16-inch 6.5 Creedmoor too. What does that thing weigh? Like 3 pounds?
I'm still working on it. I wish it weighed 3 pounds, but it's probably going to come out right at 5, maybe 2 ounces over 5 pounds.
Oh, okay, all right.
and that's without optic or with optic?
Without.
Okay.
Without.
Okay.
Optic, yeah.
Oh, well, it's not that crazy.
Yeah, with the optic, I'm guessing it'll be around 6.5 or 7.
Okay.
With the optic.
And you don't run a bipod?
I do actually.
Okay.
Yep. And that one, it's got this Neopod on it that I'm running.
Yep.
And it's like some kind of glass reinforced nylon.
There's some nice bipods
Yeah.
out there. I was recently running one from Javelin, which is Spartan Precision out of the UK, I think, and really a nice setup. I mean, it's just several ounces, and he's got some extendable carbon legs that you can put in that thing, so you can kind of go from a low height to a longer height.
Oh, so it's
Really
otherwise
nice
non-adjustable,
setup.
like a fixed length? And then,
Fixed length,
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah.
So you basically have either a short height or a tall height.
Interesting.
But again, the weight is just a few ounces, very quick to
Yeah.
use, kind of an ideal setup in my opinion
Right.
for a mountain rifle.
Are you using shooting sticks at all?
No, because that
either.
covers it. If it's got to go taller than that, then I'm going to rest them up on a pack
Sure.
or something like
Yep.
that to
Sure.
gain that extra height. But
Yeah, I got away from bipods really some years ago because I found it was changing the balance point of my lightweight rifles, and I really was not using bipods as much as I thought I was. I was shooting off packs, or in my case, sticks, because I'm pretty tall, so I shoot off my bottom.
I always shoot off my bipod.
Do you really?
Just about every time I've shot off my bipod, yeah.
I just run into a lot of situations which I don't have a shot off my bipod.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can
So-
see that.
yeah, that's where
Depends
having a
on the
little
hunt.
more height is
Yep.
definitely helpful.
Yeah. And
Depends on the hunt for sure.
Yeah. That's interesting. I'm not planning on putting a bipod on this hunt that we're going on tomorrow.
Yeah.
No, I think we'll be all right.
I mean, on the muzzleloader, not even the muzzleloader that's in like a PRS looking chassis
Oh,
system.
man. She's about 10 pounds too.
That is a.
I was
bizarre
thinking-
looking-
Yeah, muzzle loaders and lightweight don't go together really well.
Yeah.
That's a new market. I might look into that. I love muzzleloaders. I think this makes number 8 for me, so I've got a problem with front stuffers. But
Yeah. There's a name for him. Erik, you've been relatively quiet over there. Now I think you and I are probably the most or the least experienced in.
Absolutely.
I am the least, but you.
I'm right there with you on
We're
this
kind of in the
stuff.
same boat.
Yep.
You came in. You said you had a couple questions or something like that.
Well, so my biggest takeaway that I brought, from that South Dakota hunt and in the Montana hunt, and granted these weren't. I wasn't camping out of my backpack. We had a base camp set up.
Yep.
But on both of those hunts, the number one thing that I overpacked on was fuel for my cook stove. And, I did that in South Dakota, way overpacked on that, and then did that again in Montana. Could you guys just kind of talk about that? I know you kind of dived into it a little bit, and water, too, transporting water.
Water's a big one.
That was my biggest question, was water, and how do you guys stay hydrated out there?
Well,
Two good questions. And
so with fuel, some of it comes down to research. I've used my stove a lot, and I know kind of how long it takes. Like David mentioned, he knows his burn rate at that given altitude. Now, I'm not hunting.
Can you
at those
just find that online on the stove's website?
Yeah,
or something?
there's a lot of it out there. I mean, there's a lot of people like Dave that this is like a very fun and enjoyable thing, is to go out and discover these kinds of bits of information. And it is really neat. There's a lot of good YouTube videos out there of guys doing mountaineering and showing you boil times between stoves and different tips and tricks, and it's fun to watch. But once you kind of know what your stove has for efficiency and then how it burns, like you can kind of map that.
Right.
Ooh.
And how how you like to do, whether you're gonna run that stove morning and evening, or maybe just one time during the day. And me, for example, I tend to just run it in the evening, and then not even every evening. I can't eat like a mountain house dinner every night. I just wouldn't on an 8-9 day hunt. I'd be tired of them before then. And then in the mornings, I usually don't heat anything up at all. I might just typically eat a granola bar and roll out and go. So it depends a little bit on what you like to do. If you're and some guys will like to carry that stove with them during the day. And heat up a thing of soup or something. So everybody's going to be a little different that way.
And stove style is a lot different too. Like we were talking about the efficiency of certain stoves, and I run a particular stove that is a very low efficiency stove, and you've seen that it burns very quick, it burns very hot, it boils water at low altitudes very fast, and it weighs nothing. But my trade-off is it eats fuel like a drag car. So if you're really conscious of this, and you've got a good windscreen and you've got everything set up, and you kind of know how long it takes to boil, you can sip it and that kind of thing. Usually one of the small like a 4-ounce container will last me enough of a trip. If I'm worried about it, I'll bring 2.
Gotcha.
I used to bring like 2 small ones, 2 big ones, an just like way over the hill. Like I'm going to be packing in for 2 months, and it's completely unacceptable.
So a lot of it comes down to just understanding how you're gonna be using it. Not so much.
And then
and then
your particular stove.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So I still have a hard time getting into the super efficient stoves, that just sip fuel, because they're so large. Like they take up a lot of pack space. Like my whole cook kit, my cup, my canister, my fork, my everything fits inside of what's called the GSI bottle cup. And it's like the size of a slightly larger than a baseball, slightly smaller than a softball. And that's the whole thing. Stove, fuel, lighter, spoon, stand, the whole caboodle, right? And to go to one of the more efficient stoves, it would just be physically much larger, and it's hard for me to do that. So I'm sure I will, because efficient stoves are better than non-efficient stoves. But
yes and no, though. Depends on what you're doing, how long you're going to be there, and how many times you plan on torching her off.
Right.
Yeah.
It could be the optimal. Thing.
Even physical space. So now we're talking about also in addition to weight.
Yep. And that comes down to pack management. So that's another thing. Like get a really good pack. Don't go buy the Walmart school bag and head out on your sheep hunt. Get like a really good pack. Investing in a pack for me, and look at the weight on the pack. And this is something that I was ignorant to until I started here at Vortex.
You need the one that has the pocket for your trapper keeper.
Oh, yeah.
And the loop for your gigapet. When I started at Vortex, and I was looking at what like Dave and Paul and Mark were running specifically, it was like these packs were remarkably lighter weight and remarkably just better built than what I was running. And so I've switched packs 3 times since I've been here. And I finally settled on one that I really like. So, and that's a great debate too.
The other question I had was water.
Yeah.
Oh,
What-
yeah, sorry.
That's another big weight item
so,
there.
you know,
Do you pack it in, or do you go Bear Grylls? And
Kind of depends on where you are.
So, like,
Well,
are you
actually, if you
thinking
went Bear
like
Grylls,
how
you
you
just go to the
procure
motel.
water, or
Yeah,
are you carrying all your water with you, or what?
Both. I mean,
Okay.
so like, for example, if you're going on a hunt where you have a base camp, let's say you have a wall tent set up,
Yep.
you can throw 48 bottles of water in the back and
Yep.
you're good to go
Yep.
for a
Right.
week. Now on a backcountry hunt, that's not possible.
No.
So like,
No.
you have to worry about, to your point,
You got to
procuring
procure
it.
water.
Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
I
So
mean,
that's-
water is really heavy.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
you know, you're not. I mean, like on the unlimited hunt, I'm not carrying all my water for the
Yep.
11 and a half days. It's impossible. You know. But there's plenty of water out there, although it was a dry summer, so we ran into some issues where it was hard to find water at times. I mean, at one point at 11,000 feet with it snowing on us, we were digging where there was a spring into the mud about 2 feet down to try and find water that was seeping up. Just to get water, we each had about a half a liter left each.
Did you just like?
Yeah.
Did you
Yeah,
just
do
like?
do your homework on where
Yeah.
you're going to get
Yep.
the water.
Did you just
at.
like guess a spot and start digging, or did you?
No, I had done a lot of research ahead of time, and I knew that there was a spring there, and there was. It just was kind of dry at that point in time, and
Oh.
it was
Yeah.
real mushy. The ground was kind of muddy, but there was nothing flowing, so we dug down to try and get some water to seep up. We ended up not staying up there because the water was so hard to get, but and going back down to a different spot. But yeah, I mean, even there on the Unlimited, there was one campsite we found that was really good, and it had no water at it at all. So we ended up going back to our previous campsite after dropping all of our gear, and then taking every container we could find that could hold water back with us, filling it all up with water, and then hauling. It was about 18 liters of water, I think, that we hauled back, my partner and I.
That's a lot.
And
of
melting the
So-
snow isn't really an option because that takes a lot of fuel probably if you're gonna
Yeah,
do it
you don't want to
yourself.
plan on that. It takes
Yeah.
way
Yeah.
too much fuel to melt snow than what you're going to want to do.
So to Eric, to your question there, like different means of procuring water out in the wild and making it like safe to drink. There's like Steri pens; those are pretty cool. They're pretty lightweight.
Yeah.
Iodine tablets. They make your water taste funny, but it's
they're the ultralight setup.
correct. Yeah, but it's a great way not to.
And they take time.
Yeah.
too.
They do take
Yeah.
a little time. Yeah, don't wait till the last second.
Yeah.
I use a number of pump filters from the Catadine group. So I've got them in large to very small. I use. I've got a life straw. I've never had to use a life straw, thankfully, but
That's where you can just stick it right into the.
direct from source. Yeah, and it'll filter out a lot of stuff that'll make you not feel good, but it won't filter out everything. So if I have to use my life straw, it sucks.
Well, once you get Giardia, once you can't get it again, right? That's how that works.
no,
No,
man,
no.
I've had
It's like
Giardia.
chicken pox, right?
You're going to get us sued, Jimmy.
Yeah, I've had Giardia. You don't want Giardia. It's bad.
I just thought I saw that on WebMD. Anyway,
I think if you saw it on WebMD, then
I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Do not take that to heart.
There's
Yeah,
a little.
be careful about that stuff. I've gone, years drinking water off the mountain without doing anything, but I'm usually extremely careful about doing it.
Sure.
And that's, if I can find a water source, a little bit like Dave's describing, where it's coming out of the ground.
Yep.
I've drunk a lot of water like that, and
Right.
knock on wood, haven't
Hasn't
had
been-
Giardia yet.
Hasn't been running down through.
No, if
Deer crab
if I
and-
can't see where it's coming from, it's
Yeah.
then it's definitely tablet time. But I usually stay away from the filters. I just find they
Yep.
tend to be a little heavy, a little bulky.
Yep.
They do a good job. A little slow to use.
I've had a break on me, though.
They
Yeah.
can break. They can
Yep.
clog
Yeah.
with silt if you
Yep.
if you hunt in water like up in Alaska. I guess the tablets work okay. Like Dave said, it's usually about a half hour time set
Yep.
on putting a tablet in and being able to drink. But nice thing is they're tiny, they're small, they're ultralight. They'll get
Yeah.
you by.
Well, what kind of water? Depending on your water source, can also, and I guess I'm saying this more talking to guys secondhand, but can kind of dictate what type of filter you may want to use. Because if it's really dirty, silty water, like you said, you'd be out of luck with some filters, maybe versus other filters, or other ways of purifying that water.
Yeah, you can do something like using a piece of cloth or material to take just coarse chunks of stuff that you look
Right.
at and don't exactly appeal to you to the look. when you get down to the little stuff, then you have to rely on the iodine or whatever it is to block that out. But I've drunk out of some pretty nasty looking places, but yet where I knew the water was coming out of the ground,
Right.
and I felt safe about it.
Some of the bars too we used to go to in college, people to get drinks there and drink. I can't even believe some of those kids are still alive.
Gerard, yeah.
Anyway,
One of the things that I've done, and it's just because of situations I've run into in the past where I've been in like Wyoming. I'm thinking of one just south of Jackson, Wyoming there, and it was so dry, and the only water we could find was this muddy seep, a dried up or was drying up creek bed, and we basically were pretty much out of water, and so trying to get anything that was clear whatsoever was nearly impossible, and it was hard to even pick it up because it was just seeping along the ground. So one of the things I figured out is you can take like a platypus bottle. It's like one of those flexible, super lightweight water containers. I cut the back of it off, so it's an open hole on the back, but I cut it in like a V shape. And then the cap, I just took my Dremel tool, cut a hole in the cap, and then I just took a piece of like coffee filter, like a metal coffee filter, and I placed it over top of the opening and screwed the cap back on. So I essentially have a bag with a V-cut opening on the back side, and then the front side has a filter on it. And so I can use that V-cut to kind of push it down into the mud and collect a trickle of water, and then when it fills the bag up enough, you can tip it up and then let it kind of trickle out through the coffee filter, and you're getting clear water. And that's, even with tablets, you never really know if you're purifying everything when you got a lot of chunks in the water.
Right.
And especially with like a Sterapen or something, UV light, the light has to get to all the water.
Yep.
So you've got to have clear water if the Sterapen is going to work.
Huh.
So that's a trick that's maybe an ounce or two for that bag, and it helps you get to water pre-filtered.
is that your mountaineering days, or is that your mystery?
No, I learned
your
that
mystery
recently,
days?
actually.
Oh, recently, huh?
Yeah.
I think for the average consumer, though, plan on being in a situation in which you won't need to modify your platypus bag with a coffee filter.
Yeah, but you got to have something like that, right?
No, you do. I've tried.
Yeah.
It's funny. Listen, Dave. I mean, I've tried. just like using an Nalgene bottle, and there's times it is very difficult to get that water into a Nalgene bottle, so you can then purify it. So that's a pretty good tip.
Yep.
That's a good tip.
I think that's the trickiest part, and luckily I really haven't had to run into that. But when you have just those minuscule water sources where it's not like a flowing creek or even just a bigger seep or puddle where water is, I guess, more plentiful, and then I think you're likely in that situation to run into the fact that, hey, there's a lot of debris in this water that you're going to need to filter out that might clog, a regular
any
filter.
kind of pump or anything like that. Yeah.
But probably the most, quote, backcountry hunt that I've been on was a couple years ago when I went, when Jesse Knock and I bombed into that lake and then hiked into the Alpine. And we actually stayed in our tents the majority of that trip due to weather, predominantly fog, but we had a lot of rain as well. But one thing that was really shocking to me was with the amount of just how wet it is up there all the time and the amount of weather that we were experiencing while we were there. By our camp, there was kind of a constant trickle of water that was filling this pool, and then it kind of tailed out. But there was one day where we didn't get any weather, and the difference in the level of the water at that source between just that day was astronomical. I mean, I was filling I was using a Sawyer Squeeze, which is actually a pretty lightweight water filter, but I guess one of the maybe drawbacks with it, I believe if that filter or the filtering portion of it freezes, then you've compromised how it works.
Right.
Yeah.
And then also if you have water with a lot of debris in it, I think it, can be susceptible to clogging. And it's got a system to whatever, backwash it or whatever you want to call it. But anyway, my point being, you think of, I'm in the wettest place on earth and it's been wet. And we weren't at risk of not finding water, but that water level was like, I was filling it, like I said, with flowing water that was kind of cascading down one day, and the next day I'm dipping down in this hole, weaving around sow bugs, trying to fill that little bag to filter water.
Too, Yeah. I've seen pools where it's just, it had a good rain. In fact, I think it was a couple of years ago you had hunted in Wyoming right like a week before I was out there, and it rained, and so we got this high pool, and every day I could see that pool getting smaller and smaller. And I was starting to calculate how many days we had left up there just based on the disappearing water, basically.
Yeah.
So.
Like Dave said earlier, too, it is a good idea to have some sort of a larger container with you to haul water.
Yeah.
I've hunted in a lot of places where, you found a great place to camp. It's an ideal campsite, but you don't have water in proximity to you, and you do end up having to hike, or we've had times where you might even have to drop down 1,000, 2,000 feet down a mountain to get water, bring it back. And so you want to have something that allows you to bring back at least a couple days worth of water to have with you and avoid those types of things.
Yeah. What's your guys' daily minimum requirement that you feel safe and comfortable with? And understanding that there's extremes where you're going to have you just don't have the option to have more than say half a liter. But what's your baseline? What do you say?
Usually about 2.5 liters.
Okay.
Yeah, it's got to be close to that. I mean, ideally, you'd try to drink a gallon a day, but most of the time, in that stuff, it's not going to happen.
Right.
Yeah, you're just not going to be able to. And certainly during, obviously, I mean, this should go without saying, during the course of a day, at any point that you cross drinkable water, I'll usually really try to stop and thoroughly hydrate, restock any containers, maximize any chance you get at a water source as you're traveling around.
So from your style, like I carry it's a 2.5 liter hydration compartment plus my Nalgene is like what I like to have on me. So I drink out of my Nalgene first, and then my reserve is in my pack. Are you drawing from water from different sources when you see it, and replenishing your stock all the time, or what are you doing when you come across water? You like stop and drink?
Yeah, I would usually try. Let's say I had a Nalgene bottle. I mean, I would try to drink out of the existing water I had until I was, as much as I felt I could take, and then restock, fill that thing up at that point. If it's a questionable source, at that point I'd put an iodine tablet in there and carry on down the trail.
Yep. I see a lot of people when it's cold out, they don't drink water. And I think that's interesting.
It's a good,
it's easy to do.
It is, but it's so important. Like when it's cold, I like my hunting partners and guys I've hunted with, they just shut off to water consumption. And I see them like drinking 20 ounce in the morning when we go out, and like maybe they'll have one at lunch.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'm drinking water all the time. Like,
especially when it's
something consciously you have to force yourself to do that.
Cold too. It usually gets. Usually, not always, but a lot of times it's really dry.
Yeah.
So
especially
you don't
in
even
the
realize.
mountain country.
It's just happening.
Yep.
One thing that happened to me when I was hunting Colorado a couple weeks ago with the Hush guys was I had my water bladder in my my pack, and then the hose was exposed to the elements.
Yeah.
And it was froze solid.
Yeah.
Ooh.
One thing you can do to
started a
help
fire to stay
mitigate that
warm
is to blow air back through the hose.
Yep.
When you're
and
done.
especially if you have a valve to shut off the flow, then you can blow air through the hose and then shut the valve off to keep
that makes
air
sense.
in there. But it still isn't always foolproof. If it's really cold and you have even a little bit of water in there, it can still. The other thing is the end that you're drinking out of is to tip that up slightly. So don't have it coming and hanging straight down, because that's the hardest part to get water unfrozen from is the tip. So like if you're in really cold weather, I'll bend it and tip it up, and then that way the gravity drains any water away from the tip that you're drinking
Toward
out
the
of.
bladder.
And it might be somewhere in the middle of the hose, and it's a lot easier to bend that hose and break the ice and then get water to flow again.
Gotcha.
So those are some tips if you're using a hose in
Yeah,
cold
that's a good
weather.
tip.
I know some people don't use hoses at all in cold weather. But
One thing that I found actually which kind of defeats the purpose of having that accessibility of that hose. Like, oh, I'm thirsty. Like, I always feel like with a water bladder, I'm more inclined to drink than to unscrew my Nalgene, this, that, the other. You're like, dude, it's just a little bit faster on the go. But I just pulled it out and then tucked it back into my pack. And I think just not really probably being exposed to the wind chill, perhaps.
Yeah. And your body heat a little
by
bit
and large,
too.
and my body heat a little bit seemed pretty much sufficient to keep it from doing that again. But
Right.
All this brings up an interesting point. I think Dave and/or Paul and/or Ryan brought it up earlier, which is being lightweight and understanding a lot of the ways to shave weight, help yourself go further, hunt longer, whatever it is important. but also understanding the practical application of everything that you're doing and that you plan to do, and probably practicing in a weird sense of the word prior to doing it. You know,
Yep.
like you might see, even if it's food, you might see ahead of time where it's like, oh, well, if I eat this food, this has this many calories per ounce, whatever. Little did you know you'd never tried the food before, and you have a horrible reaction, and you wind up pooping your pants. You know, it's like if you don't try that stuff, or it could
Been
be
there.
a certain kind of pack. This pack is super light, really well built. This, that, and the other thing. I'm going to buy it and just pack everything up and take it. That pack doesn't fit you right at all.
Yep.
You know, it could be anything.
All
and
of
if
the,
you
all
don't-
this stuff from
Yeah.
boots, socks,
Yeah.
Yeah,
gear.
everything.
Yeah, you
trying
can dry
the
run
water
it.
filter that you have
Yep,
prior to
yep.
going out, to making sure that it actually works. Maybe taking it out in cold weather if you're going to go on
Yeah.
a cold weather
Yeah,
hunt.
you want to test everything you
Yeah.
can.
So sleep systems are a big one. A sleep system has, depending on how you do it, can be the make or break in weight. You know,
Yeah.
because you want to be comfortable when you sleep, you want to be safe when you sleep, especially if you're in cold environments, things like this. But I've made this mistake before, looking at numbers and figures and ratings and things like this, and saying like, oh, that is going to be perfect for me because it weighs this little, it's supposed to be that warm, has that level of fill. And I did it the wrong way. And sleeping at below freezing, even if it's 31 degrees, below freezing with an inappropriate sleep system is miserable.
Yep.
and I've slept way colder than that now that I've kind of trialed and erred and found a good way to do it. I've slept below zero and it's great, but
Yeah.
you have to try it. You can take somebody's word for it, and that might work for that person, but depending on the individual, how that person likes to sleep, whether they can sleep cold, whether they're okay with waking up every 2 hours and readjusting because they're not using a ground pad or anything like that.
And the sleeping bags are rated assuming you're using a ground pad.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't know that. They see a bag and there's like, well, it's 10 degree rated.
Right.
Well, it's 10 degree rated assuming you have a ground pad. So when they test that,
And a specific pad.
yeah, you have to have a certain R value
yeah,
pad to reach
insulated.
that 10 degree rating.
So it's kind of like when bullet companies say their foot per second or feet per second on their cartridges, but that's
Yeah.
assuming that you have a 30-inch barrel and
Yeah.
you're shooting it.
Yep.
Yeah, at
That's-
10,000 feet elevation.
Well,
Yeah.
the ground is
Yeah.
a tremendous conductor of heat. So if you're laying flat on the ground without an insulating pad between you and the ground, it's going to suck that heat right out of you. I don't care
Yeah.
how much down you have. You know.
Yeah.
Well, and to my knowledge, I guess sleeping bags specifically, I'm not sure there actually is a standard way that stuff is measured. I mean, I think companies might have.
There's a couple standards out there. I
Are
think.
there?
Oh,
There's,
yeah.
there's European, there's
Yep.
American, there's male, there's female. What else is there?
I don't know.
Those are the only ones I've seen.
Yeah.
I think that.
I think that's it.
And again, it's super subjective though, because
It is. Yeah, I would take all those ratings
Yep.
with
Yeah.
a grain of salt
I'm-
until you try it yourself.
Try it.
the,
Yeah.
the more I do it, the more comfortable I am sleeping cold. But early on, like I remember very fondly in the BWCA of Minnesota sleeping, I was excited to make a Quincy. What do they call them? Snow huts? Quincy? I was excited to do this. Crawled in there. Oh man, I did not sleep. I had 0 hours of sleep that night. I was so miserable. But as time goes on and you figure out how to do it, like you figure out like what can get cold and you'd still be able to sleep. Like your nose goes numb. That's okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. But
We'll cut that black
You know,
part
this
off
actually
later.
makes me think of another tip for packing light.
Yeah.
And it has to do with something I did with my sleep system this year, and that is any kind of gear that you can carry with you that has multi-function use. The more
Exactly.
uses it has, the lighter weight you're going to go. And so where I'm thinking on the sleep system, for example, I went with what's called a quilt this year. So it doesn't have a hood like a mummy bag. The back is completely open. So when you're laying on your pad, you're compressing all that down. So you're really not getting much insulating value. So these ultra lightweight sleep system companies, like Enlightened Equipment, which is the one I use, they're just like, well, it's not doing you any good. Let's cut the back out. Your pad is what's making you warm, so why carry that extra weight of down? And then what I did is I took a little hood that had down in it that was just like you just pull it over your head. So if I got really cold, I could sort of turn it into a quasi mummy bag. But during the day, if I was cold when I was hunting, I could also wear that same hood.
Nice.
And keep myself really warm. So it had multi-functions of use. And actually that hood and the Enlightened Equipment bag that I had, the quilt that I had combined at, is the lightest weight sleep system I've ever had, and it was the most comfortable sleep system.
Yeah.
I've
Sub
ever
2
had.
pounds.
Yeah, it was the bag itself. I think is about 22 ounces.
Yeah, that's incredible. That's just phenomenal.
And what it does is it has a little elastic strap that wraps around your pad. There's 2 of them actually. And what I found is that if you're one of those people that tosses and turns at night, especially when you're camping, in the past with a mummy bag, I find myself that thing is twisted up, so bad by the time I wake up.
You're in a big spiral from
You
one
are,
end
yeah.
to the
It's
other.
It's
Yeah.
unzipped.
You're laying on a zipper.
Every
You don't know.
sleepover,
Yeah.
all the kids wake up just like
Yeah.
totally
Tied, yeah.
contorted.
But the quilt with the 2 elastic straps going around the bottom of your pad kept it in place, and I could stretch if I wanted to. And because it was elastic and it was open on the bottom, it would stretch out as much as I wanted. But then it would pull itself back and keep me warm.
Yep.
And so I loved it. It was awesome.
What was the temp rating on your quilt, and what pad were you using?
So I was using a 10-degree rated Enlightened Equipment quilt. I got it was the extra wide one, so it had a little bit more that would come underneath my body, just on the edges. They have a choice of like the higher rated down, which I use their higher rated down, which is lighter per temp rating. And then the pad I was using was the Thermarest. It's their lightest weight one. I forget what it's called.
Yeah, I know which one.
Right now in the market, I think it's the lightest weight rated full-length pad. I almost didn't even take a full-length pad just to cut a couple more ounces out of my pack. And I was going to use maybe my pack itself to like insulate my feet, possibly.
Okay.
But then
Sure.
along with that, what I did too is a lot of guys take a sit pad during the day, right? And so what I bought was a sit pad. Usually, like you'll see them on the market, they're maybe 2-3 ounces. I bought this thing that was 2 ounces. It's an 1/8 inch closed cell foam pad, and it was about 5 feet long. And so I could fold that into a thirds or quarters and sit on it when I'm glassing. But the other thing I could do is I laid it down underneath at night, underneath my Thermarest pad, and it did 2 things for me. It gave me more insulation value, and it also protected the pad from puncture, which would be pretty disastrous out there. And then if I did puncture my inflatable pad, I still have an 1/8 inch closed cell foam to at least a survival situation. So that was a closed cell.
I was
foam.
cell phone pad.
Yeah, no.
Who needs a 5-foot cell phone pad? the iPhone Plus just got a lot bigger.
But that was to me, I mean, I was ecstatic about that setup because I'm like, now I'm actually making myself safer and I'm combining things into more multi-use and I'm getting lighter weight at the same time.
Yeah, that's good. The other, and the other thing you can do too, that probably works very well with those quilts is think of all your apparel as really as part of your sleeping system too, like your puffy jacket, all that stuff.
Yeah.
You can, and I think especially with a quilt, that probably works really well.
Yeah.
You can wear that stuff at night.
Yeah, the worst thing I found was constriction inside of my bag was reducing the effectiveness of the insulating down. And so with the quilt being as, kind of voluminous as they are, or open, you put your puffy on, you put your puffy pants on, and you're
pretty happy.
More air.
Yeah, that's what it is. Absolutely, it is.
I mean, the lightest weight 10-degree full mummy bag I can find is maybe a hair under 2 pounds, so 32 ounces.
And the cost.
And this thing is like 22. Yeah, that's the other thing. The cost. The Enlightened Equipment. I mean, they're made. I think they're made right in Minnesota, next door.
Minnesota.
And their cost compared to a lot of the other high-end brands that are out there is
50% or better
Yep.
than that.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Pretty good way to go.
That's awesome.
The other multi-use piece of equipment that I loved was my trekking poles as the center pole to my tent this year. And I am a trekking pole fan. That was just maybe another discussion, but I was carrying a Hyperlight Ultimate 4 tent this year, and that thing was unbelievably awesome. And that's another area where you can cut a lot of weight on. I mean, it's a 4-person tent. It's 9 feet by 9 feet square on the footprint of that tent. And any other tent that would come close to that size using a lot of the other materials that are out there, even the ultra lightweight ones, might be in the 4 to 5 pound range.
I was going to say, mine's
this
about,
one, it's 25 ounces for that tent, right in the 25 ounce range.
You're making almost like a bedroom-sized area.
It's the weight of a lot of bivy sacks, but it was enormous. And so for me and my hunting partner, I mean, we had so much room in there. We could pull our rifles, our packs, our gear, everything, and we still had plenty of room to spare.
Yeah, that's a
and
great
they hold
setup.
up. A lot of the mountaineers are using them on big mountains, and they're holding up to just insane winds. snow load when they get snowed on. It's a Dyneema fiber is what they're using. So they're just super light. But then, you're using your trekking pole for the center pole. And, during the day, I see trekking poles as a huge aid of active weight. I call it active weight because it's really aiding me when I'm out there hiking. And so in a way, I can almost feel like I don't have to count that weight into my tent weight.
Sure.
Because during the day, it's aiding me. And then at night, I throw it up and put my tent up.
Well, that's another dual use thing right there,
dual
too.
use right there. Yeah.
When you would leave camp, you would just pull the trekking pole and then the tent would just
kind
of collapse?
I didn't use the trekking poles during the day.
Really?
And we actually just had, I had considered hauling in, setting up a base camp, and then spiking out from there. But that's obviously 2 sets of shelters. So I was just like, I'm going to go so lightweight that I can just almost carry everything with me every day. And that's the way I went. And so a lot of times if we were going hunting out from the camp, we were so close to the spots we were going to be glassing. It would maybe like where I hauled that 18 liters of water to that nice camp I found, we were glassing less than 50 yards from the tent.
Okay,
It was awesome.
Gotcha.
Oh, okay.
And that's why we were able to do that. We could put our tent right where we wanted to glass, or very near, maybe out of sight, of course, but very near to where we wanted to glass. Because we were so lightweight, we could just haul around everywhere.
But otherwise, then you take down your tent, and then you take your trekking poles with you. And
nope,
set
I
up
leave
elsewhere?
I leave the trekking poles in the tent during the day when I was
okay.
glassing, and and of course my buddy had a set of trekking poles. So if we got an animal down and we really needed to haul, I could either run back to the tent real quick, which was 50 yards away, grab my poles, or we could just use his trekking poles for one of the guys. And realistically, you're not shooting an animal that far from the tent at that point.
No, I get it.
So
man, this is all good stuff.
I have
Here, let's call it a last call.
Okay.
All right.
Mine is
because
a
MC
wild
Ryan-
card question.
MC
for you
Ryan
guys.
flashed the 1 hour thing at me a little bit ago. So let's do last calls. Eric, your question can be your last call.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
So I have a buddy who does a lot of backcountry hunting, and he had brought mules in the past. Have you guys ever brought llamas? Because he was talking about how he switched from mules to llamas because llamas can go without water.
They're way lighter to
And-
carry.
Yeah, your llama fits in your backpack better. So, do you guys have any experience with that?
Paul
I
Neess
don't.
told me the best thing about
You don't have to
llamas
pack
and
your
horses,
merino.
though.
Yeah, you just buzz them off.
Right. Paul told me something about llamas and horses and how they don't get along because they never met in history.
Well, yeah, typically horses don't like llamas. I've worked with horses.
So
a
don't
lot
bring
of my
one of
life.
each.
Yeah.
That is a well known in the animal kingdom rivalry.
yeah.
They meet each other on the trail, and the horse is like, "The hell is that?" And the llama's just stubborn, right? Yeah, weird looking alien.
I
face.
think when you get into the llamas, Eric, you've moved out of the ultralight
Yeah.
backpacking.
And now you're trying
Yeah.
to
You're getting
you're-
into the luxury end
Yeah.
of
you're like
things
a
there with
mountain.
it.
you could.
Well, and where
You
I
can
was,
start. You can start bringing the beer
man.
along.
Yeah.
Then. You got the llamas.
I mean, where I was this fall, there were guys that actually got mules back there, and I mean, kudos to them. I don't know how they got those mules back there, and maybe it was better for them. But I'll tell you, I was looking at that, and we actually hiked back. We followed their trail back down because they kind of blazed a trail, and it looked more difficult trying to get those mules up there than it
Really?
did just hauling your gear in. And I was thinking, like, man, I'm so glad I didn't have mules up here. And they looked at us like we were crazy because we hauled everything in for 11 and a half days, and I was like, no way, man, there's no way I want to bring mules up here.
Yeah.
But it depends on the hunt. There's some places where I think it's really conducive to
Right.
horses and mules.
Or
and-
goats. Somebody
Yeah.
out there does goats
Yeah.
too.
Yep.
Yeah.
Mark, what do you got? for
Last
the
calls?
call?
Man, my last call this is always such a fun conversation. And when it comes to, true backcountry stuff, I've got, fairly limited experience. I've done a lot of hunting, but not a lot of multi-day backcountry stuff. And I've got a lot of great gear. I think I need to refine some of that gear. That quilt system actually sounds pretty sweet. I've kind of been like mentally anti-quilt for some reason, and I can't really say why. Maybe
man.
because I have a fear of being cold.
Go to it and don't turn back. That's what I'd say.
All right, I'm gonna trust. I'm gonna
He's
trust
going
the,
quilt.
the
Yeah,
master
yeah.
on
Trust
that.
the Dave.
I also have a fear of not having water, so I'm always packing maybe even too much water. But
Whole bag full of filters.
yeah.
dehydrated water.
So my goals,
Yeah.
and I also
Still trying to work on that one.
dehydrated.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was on that Colorado hunt, and we weren't. We live at a pretty low elevation here. I think we're about 800 feet, and we weren't exceptionally high when we were in Colorado, but that elevation kicked the you-know-what out of me. And I was feeling that quite a bit. Or I'm just incredibly out of shape. So we'll find out tomorrow when we're at about 3,000 feet whether which one of those things is true. But I guess my big last call, and maybe I'm saying this publicly to hold myself accountable, I am going to start getting myself in better shape to do these things better. I know, right? Yeah. Exactly. I'm doing it to myself. But I'm also going to be more cognizant. Like I've got a lot of pretty high speed, low drag gear, but I can make it lower drag, and I want to do that and see if I can refine myself.
Spreadsheet.
Maybe not to Dave level.
Spreadsheet.
I might get some help with that spreadsheet.
There you go.
And we'll go from there. So
I think it'd be the first spreadsheet I've ever seen Mark make.
It would be. Why do you think I'm having Dave help me?
My last call is probably similar to what you just said, but I frequently poke fun at Dave for all of his nerdy, lightweight spreadsheets and things, and all of his very exact plans of his hunts when he lays out a map and puts down. He doesn't just use Onyx. He actually lays out a physical map.
I'm old school.
The lost art of physical maps.
I like compass and map. I'm old school.
Yeah, so I poke fun at him for that all the time. However, I go to him I go to him for advice for like all that stuff. Just because it really honestly it can't hurt as long as you're not like, oh, I'm gonna shave weight by just not bringing food, at all. It can't hurt. And it's like, okay, do more push-ups. It's like, okay, I did more push-ups. I'm still going to go lightweight so that I can actually utilize what I got from more push-ups to go further. There you have it.
There you go. There you go. Yeah.
Paul?
I'll throw in here one, it's I guess kind of the downside to all this stuff, and that's that all this gear we're talking about is really cool gear. And unfortunately, a lot of times it's really expensive.
Yeah, that's
so
true.
I think what I would throw out to people is maybe someone will get interested in this after this conversation. They'll kind of go out and read around the forums and talk with the gear junkies out there. Don't necessarily get wrapped up in having to have absolutely the latest, greatest, latest, coolest thing, because you run up an astronomical bill doing it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that comes really close to being the best. That's a lot less expensive, and that you can do that with. I think there's times I've, and Dave, you and I run much of the same gear. I've sat and kind of mentally tallied up the cost of what looks to be this tiny little
You're a braver
camp.
man than me.
That's the spreadsheet.
That's
the spreadsheet you don't want to look at.
Yeah.
That is.
So don't get hung up on having to have just the absolute
that's
coolest
great
gear.
advice.
There's a lot of good stuff out there. That's
actually,
not so bad.
That's a good last call. If you are going to make a spreadsheet, don't put a dollar figure column on it, because if maybe your SIG other finds that, you're going to have another issue on your hands.
Sometimes some really cheap stuff is actually some of the best and lightest weight stuff.
Yeah.
There's some disposable things out there. Like, for example, the ground sheet on my tent. Either $8 for a ground sheet, and it's like 1.5 ounces, and it lasts for a good trip, and then you tear it up after that, and it's done, And so there are sometimes some really good, ultra cheap stuff that's really lightweight.
Shop around a little bit. Yeah. Yep.
What you got, Dave?
So I was going to say compartmentalization. So I'm a big fan of that. Now, you might say, well, if you're compartmentalizing your pack, is that more weight for all these bags? Well, yes, but this year I used Hyperlight's They're compartmentalization Dyneema bags, and they're about 1/2 ounce each. And it does a couple things. One is I like to be fast, not only light. So if you've ever been on a hunt and you've been with your buddy, or maybe you've been the guy where it's like, well, yeah, I'll be ready to go in just a second, and you have this explosion all over the ground. Especially if you're high altitude and the wind's blowing and now all the things going everywhere. That kind of, one, it can tell you you're carrying too much stuff. But the other thing is it just makes you a lot quicker if you sort of compartmentalize things in those bags. And then what I would say is when I compartmentalize those bags, they're so lightweight. I can unpack and pack super fast, but don't feel like you got to stuff it so it's just like hard as a rock, like a basketball when you stuff it in there. Those bags are so lightweight. Leave them a little bit loose so that you can compress it around inside your pack. Otherwise, you're trying to put a whole bunch of basketballs in your pack versus things that can shape and move around. But it just makes you a lot faster when you want to unpack your camp and get it. And sometimes, survival wise, when you're out there hunting, you need to get a tent up fast and you need to get unpacked quickly, or vice versa. You want to get on the move because you've seen where the animals are at and you want to pack that camp up and you don't want to be the guy holding everybody up. So I like compartmentalization.
It's good stuff.
Good tip.
Ryan,
Good
you want to
tip.
close us out?
Sure. I think for a lot of people listening, the thought process now is you've got to go on the internet and spend a tremendous amount of money to do it. And like Paul said, you don't. Like Dave said, be organized. The biggest takeaway from this one, the ultralight hunting thing, for me, the best piece of success is, to Dave's tip, the spreadsheet. It has been remarkable. When I created it, I drew it up originally with everything I thought I needed.
Yep.
I checked the boxes. I took it on a hunt. I came back and said absolutely not to a lot of that stuff. Just deleted that column completely so it was out of sight, out of mind. And every year it gets smaller and smaller and more refined. And now, it's getting to the point where I hope to, at some point, just have my pack set, ready to go, kind of wherever I go. And aside from a couple of key things, depending on climate or terrain, you don't have to add much to it and you're ready to run.
Yeah.
So organization is almost as much anything, or is almost as important as anything in ultralight hunting, because it is a different speed.
It's like Ken Block's Ford Fiesta WRC, where they can just change out the suspension and wheels and tires. And
Exactly
all of a
what
sudden
I was
it's a
saying.
rallycross machine. Then all of a sudden it's a drag or a drift machine. Then all of a sudden it's
Yeah. Also,
quintessential car reference. All right, there we go.
None of it was making sense until you put it in that perspective.
Right.
You're welcome, car guys.
don't buy a big giant rifle caliber if you're going to buy a light rifle.
Yeah.
Buy something palatable that you can shoot well.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's all.
Absolutely. That's a
Good
great
tip.
one.
Awesome. All righty. Well, we're gonna stick a fork in this one. A very lightweight fork.
Titanium.
Yeah,
Or maybe
perhaps
aluminum
a
even.
spork.
Or plastic.
Yeah. Plastic sporks are cheap. So I got all off topic. Hey, thanks for listening, everybody. What do you think about lightweight hunting? Comment when we post this one on Instagram at Vortex Nation Podcast. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you want to know about International Man of Mystery Dave. We probably won't tell you, but it'd just be funny to know what you want to know or what you think he did. Alrighty, and we'll see you guys next time. Happy hunting and shooting.
See ya.
All right. See you later.
All right, that'll wrap it up for this episode of the Vortex Nation podcast. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Hit that subscribe button so you can always stay up to date on the latest happenings over here at the Vortex Nation podcast. You can also follow us on Instagram at Vortex Nation Podcast. Again, everybody, thanks, and happy hunting and shooting. We appreciate it. Have a good one.